Good evening. The latest word from Brussels is that 40 people died and 350 were injured at tonight's European Cup final when a wall collapsed after rioting between Liverpool and Juventus fans. Belgian television said tonight the dead were 33 Italians, 2 French, 1 Belgian, and the others of unknown nationality. Already questions are being asked about how and why it happened. The sports minister, Mr. Neil McFarlane, said tonight he had feared trouble at the match and had warned the Belgian authorities 3 weeks ago to take extra precautions. Even after the tragedy, dozens of fans, apparently unaware of how many had died, continued fighting with each other and with the police. The game eventually started an hour and a half late. The trouble began when Liverpool fans invaded terraces occupied by Juventus supporters. In the stampede to escape, a wall collapsed and those who died were crushed under it. The Prime Minister, who saw the violence on television, said she shared the universal horror at the scenes shown. She said those responsible had brought shame and disgrace to their country and to football. The Labour leader, Mr. Neil Kinnock, said he was angered and horrified at the senseless violence. Dr. David Owen of the SDP said the scenes in Brussels were a devastating blow to Britain's standing in Europe. Merseyside police have issued an emergency telephone number. It's 051 709 6010. That's 051 709 6010.
It began on open terracing at one end of the packed Heysel Stadium. It seems that Liverpool fans suddenly surged towards the Juventus supporters who fled in panic. As they did so, the police were momentarily overwhelmed, a safety barrier gave way, and people were literally crushed underfoot. The police had to fight to try to free those trapped, but amid the pandemonium, more and more were trampled as those behind began to panic. Elsewhere on the terraces, the fighting continued, the fans oblivious of the disaster that had already been caused. Police who tried to intervene were stoned. And when the area finally was cleared, the full horror of what had happened became apparent. There were literally bodies everywhere, dead, dying, and seriously wounded. For many, there was simply no medical treatment available. Police, firemen, and ambulance men overwhelmed by what had happened. Outside the stadium, there were desperate attempts to revive the living, but many were beyond help. They were left to lie on the tarmac.
We don't understand how is it possible during a sport match to meet such a trouble, such a dementia behavior of the supporters, of the crowd. It's incredible.
The next minute, some fellow was over his daughter, 14-year-old daughter, over. So I went over, but he was not, she was dead like.
I will not come against the football. I have finished with Liverpool now, tell you.
I've finished with football.
When they go away from our team, I will come back. That type of person. I hate them.
I've finished with football. I'm finished with the lot.
The fleet of ambulances arrived at the ground to ferry the injured to local civilian and military hospitals. The police, meanwhile, began the task of trying to find out exactly what happened, although they admit it may be impossible. British police have been asked to help.
Going to hospital. We're going to hospital. I need to see your face.
Can you tell us exactly what the British police are doing to help you?
Well, they are now going to the police to the station, railroad station of Jet. That is the nearest station, and they are trying to make several convoys of trains to put the English people as soon as possible, so much as possible, to Ostend, and to get some boats there to go back to England.
Extra staff have been drafted into Brussels hospitals to cope with the wounded. The death toll is now put at 38, with 257 injured, 15 of them in a critical condition. As the treatment goes on, Brussels police face the task of keeping the rival fans apart.
The tragedy is over, the dead and injured taken away, but still the Liverpool fans will not let up. For an hour they riot. Police line up to confront them. Missiles are thrown. A policeman is hit. The fighting fans turn their attention on the police and outnumber them, forcing the police to run for their own safety. Mounted police reinforcements come in. A group of fans turn on the one fan with a bag round his neck. The fan at the back of the picture picks up a brick and throws it at him. He seeks refuge with the police. But the police misinterpret his action, and they too turn on him. Still, the fans riot. Italian fans tell the Liverpool fans what they think of them, a gesture clearly prepared well before this evening. The rioting escalates. Now it's smoke bombs and pieces of burning wood. For an hour, the fans riot, and the match has not yet begun.
Against such a violent backdrop, the match itself was predictably a tense and subdued affair. How much the players have been told of the tragedy isn't clear, but the action at times reflected the shocked mood in the stadium. Liverpool's Lawrenson lasted just 3 minutes when an old shoulder injury returned. He left for the dressing room, no doubt relieved to be out of the fray. The Juventus defensive tactics were as ever uncompromising. Paul Walsh's run ended by a heavy Tardelli tackle. But as the sterile first half went on, Liverpool began to show a few touches of their former European glory. Walsh's snapshot well saved by Taccioni. Juventus were relying on the breakaway, but only once did it get Cabrini a clear shot, Grobbelaar's athletic dive keeping it out. Liverpool, though, were creating most of the chances, but failing to convert them. Walk broke the offside trap, to be met by a very good save. Half-time saw an uneasy peace between the fans, but 11 minutes into the second half, Juventus finally broke the stalemate on the pitch. Gillespie cynically brought down Boniek in full flight. It was well outside the area, but such was the mood of the Liverpool players, they hardly complained about the penalty. The Frenchman Platini put it away with ease, and Liverpool's hold on the European Cup was finally loosened. "1-0 it stayed to the end, and as Juventus took the European Cup for the first time in their history, their fans lit the traditional victory bonfires. The consequences of the violence, though, made it a hollow victory. Whether either of the teams will be allowed into Europe next season has yet to be resolved, but it is one sanction that could be implemented. The Juventus players, meanwhile, celebrated in the way footballers always do, oblivious of the events of 3 hours earlier, possibly not even realising the extent of the tragedy. At this point, the Liverpool team thanked their law-abiding fans and made a quiet exit, leaving the stadium as quickly as possible to start a depressing journey home. Joe Fagan looking as bemused as anyone as he began his retirement. Juventus was still on the pitch at this point, taking every ounce of glory from a match which had cost so many lives. Peter Staunton, ITN Sport.
UEFA said tonight they allowed the game to go ahead to avoid further trouble. The Sports Minister, Mr. Neil McFarlane, has called for a rigorous inquiry into the incident. He said he'd feared problems might occur in advance.
I telegrammed the director of the European Football Association last week, and I also wrote to my opposite numbers a fortnight or so ago, both in Holland and in Belgium, in preparation for these two finals. And I asked them to ensure that the preparation for this match had rigorously followed that European code. And as we've had problems before, and as I feared there might be a surfeit of black market tickets, that's why I telegrammed, because I believe that if all those ground rules and recommendations are implemented, then I think you can eliminate some of these problems. But quite clearly what we now have to do is to establish the facts, and I shall have those throughout the day and the night.
Do you think it's possible that British teams might now be banned from European competition?
I think we've been facing that problem for a number of years, and that's why I went to Europe in January 1983 and asked all the ministers for the 23 member nations of the Council of Europe to consider deeply exactly what was a European problem. It isn't solely an English problem or a British problem. It is a European problem, and violence has occurred in Italy, it's occurred in Holland, it's occurred in West Germany and France and Spain and many other countries of the world. It is not solely an English problem, but I do believe that the European Football Association have got to look very closely at all the details leading up to this particular match.
The Deputy Leader of Liverpool City Council, Mr. Derek Hatton, said tonight he was calling off a civic reception planned for the Liverpool team tomorrow.
Obviously, I think as a result of what's happened tonight, there is no way that the people of Liverpool would want us to actually be celebrating anything. That certainly the team would have to be welcomed back because they played a very good game of football. And certainly even though there's nothing to celebrate as far as the not winning the match, there's certainly nothing to celebrate as far as all those lives that have been lost are concerned. And there's no way we as a City Council will be part and parcel of any sort of celebrations tomorrow.
The Bishop of Liverpool, the Right Reverend David Shepherd, said tonight that the government and Liverpool itself would have to think seriously about solutions to the problems of football hooliganism. He's in the studio now with Phil Redden.
Bishop Shepherd, you've seen those television pictures. What's your reaction?
Well, first of all of us in Liverpool feel ashamed at the scenes that we've seen tonight, and there's no way of avoiding that sense that we have of very great grief, of wanting to send our sympathy and our prayers to people who've been injured, people who've been bereaved, both in Liverpool and in Turin and in Brussels.
In the past, Liverpool supporters have been very well behaved. What do you think went wrong this time?
Well, it's impossible from a distance to say that. What you've said is quite true. Our tradition is of peaceful rivalry. We saw it in that marvellous Milk Cup final between Everton and Liverpool last year, in derby matches here this year. And it's tragic that what is clearly a minority are endangering a great sport for the loyal football fans, all of whom would condemn unreservedly the kind of violence we've seen tonight.
Were we right to go ahead and play after what happened?
That's very difficult to say from a distance. I found myself saying, how could you go and play a match following that? But that's impossible to say from a distance, and I think people on the spot had to make a judgment.
What's the mood in the city tonight? How are people taking it?
Well, I think I've expressed it, that there is a feeling of shame, there is a feeling of great grief and letdown and loss, that what should have been a great football occasion has been ruined in every way.
Well, the team and the fans will be back in Liverpool tomorrow. How do you think they'll be received?
Well, it's bound to be very subdued and very hurt. Football means a great deal in the city, but not that kind of rivalry. There's a tremendous, genuine interest in sport and in football, and many people have taken heart from that. Nobody can take any heart whatever from the scenes of tonight.
How badly will our standing in Europe be affected, do you think?
Well, it must call that in question, of course, it's easy to build up a series of bad stories.
Bishop Shepherd, we're out of time. Thank you for joining us.
For the Liverpool manager, Mr. Joe Fagan, it was a tragic end to his career. Tonight was his last game as the manager of the Liverpool team.
I don't understand the mentality of people. And nobody yet has found the answer, I'm sorry to say. But it's really dreadful, and maybe it's about time I did get out of the game. What a sad way to go.
As the fans started leaving the stadium, the Belgian police started the careful task of shepherding everyone out of the stadium. Hundreds of Belgian riot police stayed on duty in the streets of Brussels tonight to keep rival groups of supporters apart during the operation to clear the city of both English and Italian fans. Police are determined there should be no revenge attacks or fresh outbreaks of fighting. Meanwhile, Red Cross tents have been set up outside the ground to treat the less seriously injured. Fans have been gathering at the tents, anxiously waiting for news of injured or missing relatives. So that's the news tonight from ITN at the end of one of the saddest and bitterest days in British and European soccer, in which at least 40 fans died and about 350 were injured. The Prime Minister and many others have condemned the violence which Liverpool fans are accused of starting. Everyone who saw it felt this was indeed a black day for soccer and for Britain. Good night.